This video is made possible by our patrons.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Meta Breakers. Following on from the World Championship winners, we've got our own selection of home brand winners for this week's episode. So just back from winning the Warhammer World Teams event, we've got 3 of the 4. I wasn't there. I'm going to take all the credit that Fabian would have gotten, but none of the blame for playing KO. But yeah, so we are joined by Luke as always. If you want to wave, Luke. And then
hello, guys.
Jack, who you've seen before. And then Phil, this is his first time on Meta Breakers, though he's a longtime friend of the channel. So that'll sort of, before we get into all the juicy goss, I think that's going to be our intro point for the evening. So Phil, why don't you tell us about just your Warhammer history, who you are as a person, as a player.
Oh, crikey, this will get emotional for me. Yeah, I'm Phil. Hi, guys. How you doing? I have been playing GW games since the 1980s and been playing OS again since about 2018. Tend to do events at Warhammer World. Played a couple of teams events there. Tend to do doubles every year. I've been fortunate enough to, or over the years, play the Wargamer Online lads when they used to give dice away. I was fortunate enough to meet them, and then earlier this year was fortunate enough to play Jack and Phil at the doubles. Had a really good ding dong matchup. Be haunted by trogs for a very long time, and then after that got into a couple of chats with Phil, Jack, and Luke just around joining as part of getting Northern Studio set up really, and coming on board and playing some games with Luke and Fabian up here, and trying to pull them away from their hook into the meta world and a bit more narrative AOS.
Yeah, bit more Meta Breakers, very on brand, very on point.
Absolutely. Don't judge me by the list you're about to see.
Yeah, and so ends the Meta Breakers content for the evening. Basically, you guys and Fabian, you won the Warhammer World Teams event, and we're going to be talking about that and about how, particularly for yourself, Phil and Jack, about how sort of transitioning into those sort of the higher level competitive play, and just about how that doesn't have to be as scary as maybe some people think tournaments are. So, seeing as we're talking to you, we might as well continue with you, Phil. But so, I mean, as you say, you've been doing Warhammer for a long time, so I presume you had a sort of reasonably cool head on you going in. But was there anything you were thinking about when you're like, Luke's like, look, I know it looks like he's like, we got to win. If we drop a single point over the weekend, I'll never talk to you, etc., etc. Like, what were you thinking basically going into the event?
So I think the thing was it was interesting to see the build up, to the level of planning and prep and understanding that high end players like yourself, Luke, and Fabian bring to it. The breakdowns of lists, the test games, things like that. Like normally going to a GW tournament, I might decide on a Wednesday or Thursday what do I fancy playing. I'm reasonably comfortable with my own gameplay and kind of going, well, I'll test take something I like. I'm relatively happy that'll 4-1, something like that. That does for me, and having a fun weekend. To see the plan, the idea of even doing test games going in was just something completely different. And the level of planning and prep and understanding was just another level, really. And for me, I guess the main question mark you'll see on the list when we pull them together, we tried to, as a team, get that understanding of what other lists we might come across, that forward planning of what you might need to face, what you might need to be able to find a way to overcome, and trying to balance those lists then across the 4 of us so that we could actually compete against any other 4 combination. Really, that was interesting. But I ended up playing, we'll come on to the list, the Gits list, which for me was a very, very different build style, play style to my own army. So I tend to, my number 1 army is Flesh Eaters, to be fair. So exactly, right? So lots of fast moving, mobility, summoning, all that kind of thing. And the Gits is very much more, deploy as a castle, overlapping buffs, make sure all your ranges are right. And it's a very methodical, very devastating, but very methodical style of play, which isn't, and Luke's played me a few times, not necessarily my natural style of play. I prefer the gung-ho style. That was just it, really. And conscious then, I think, of the team dynamics very different. You don't want to let your teammates down.
Yeah.
So, I've done a teams event at Warhammer World before with a local gaming club of mine. We didn't put any prep in. We just took the list we fancied, you know what I mean, and went to have fun. So to see that level of prep work going in and the understanding of every different type of list out there, like I say, we'll no doubt get onto mocking Luke variously through this video, but to be fair, to him, the amount of work and prep work that went into that build-up was just, I think, Jack, you'll agree, to see the level of effort he put in. It would just been a totally different experience without him. So yeah, that was a big thing, I guess. Just making sure you knew. You got your head around which list you were likely to face to keep the list safe. As I say, when you talk about the KO and stuff, there's certain lists you don't want to put them into. So therefore, knowing that you're likely to, between the rest of us, face them at some point and practice that. Yeah. So yeah, they were the big things really: play style, teammates, and just that.
Yeah, that level of prep.
You as a team of 4. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean,
I was going to say, I think that was the big thing for me, like. Because not only was this, I've done I did Slaughter earlier in the year, which I suppose was like a stepping stone into the competitive scene.
Sure.
But this was like my first kind of like competitive tournament where I was going to be competitive and with kind of the goal of winning the tournament. But also it was my first teams tournament, so when you're playing singles, if you mess up, then it's like, like I can kick myself, but I don't worry about it. If you like mess up in the team, and you've got like Luke breathing down your neck, or like Fabian shouting at you or something, so you do have that like extra level of stress, I found. But like, in fairness, I'm making Luke sound like a demon, but it is like self-imposed stress. Luke was lovely, and he was not being horrible or anything like that, but especially with like Luke and Fabian being these like competitive players, and you can see their brains working at the different level, and you're just there with your army like, oh, I'm gonna roll some dice and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Back to the team thing is like Jack said there, knowing the level that Luke and Fabian normally play at, and knowing you don't want to let your teammates down. So you're like, I think I can hold my own in this environment, but actually this is now it. It's on the line to demonstrate you can. So that was a driver to it.
No, absolutely. I definitely think
you didn't get a red card being on the same team as Fabian.
which is an experience. The coolest man in Warhammer. So
for sure. I think it is that it is prep that separates a lot of this stuff, and knowing those bits and bobs. And I think you both touched on it absolutely. That like, especially when you see your teammates practicing and prepping, you're like, well, I don't want to come away from the event where it's like everybody else prepped, played really hard, and I sort of just was winging it and didn't do as well, because you're like, well, again, it's different from singles where you're like, yeah, I really should have read what KO do. You're like, well, everyone else was reading.
I think the other thing as well is getting, I think, our heads around, Jack, wasn't it? Like just the sheer depth of knowledge that you guys who play at Worlds and stuff have of every other list out there. So, we talked about this at the weekend, didn't we? Kind of going, look, in a good year, even now helping out on some of this Northern Studio stuff, I might play 50, 60 times a year if I'm lucky. Whereas yourselves, the Worlds players, you're playing 300, 400, 500 times a year between TTS and live. It's just another level of understanding where me and Jack would be looking at some of those lists, being like, oh, I'm not sure about that, and I'm not sure about that, and Luke like, no, it's fine. Jack, you're going to go and win that game, and Fabian's going to go and table them in turn one.
Yeah.
Phil, you just hold and you'd be like, really? You've already? And he's like, yeah, it's just a cert, and then it would more often not play out how they'd said it would, and it's like, actually, this is much more of a statistical kind of, once you know it inside and out, and the other armies you're facing, actually it does break down to much more of almost, and I don't like to say it because I don't like to think of AOS like this, but almost a little bit of a rock, paper, scissors setup. And which, again, the team's environment's very different, because some of our lists had gaping weaknesses if you took them to a singles event.
Sure.
But because, and again, we'll mock him in this video, but because of the captaincy, because of the pairings, Luke could shield you from the games you knew you didn't want to have, you couldn't win. So it is a very different environment, because you can skew your list, knowing that
and kind of going from that, like only playing like 50, 60 games as well, like if you're in a local community playing against kind of the same 10 or 15 players every game, you're only going to have a select pool of armies you've played against. You might have not played against Feck in since second edition, so you're coming to a tournament and Feck's there, and you're like, oh, what does this do? Whereas like Luke, Luke played Feck yesterday, so he's like, oh, this is what this list does, like, watch out for that. And you're like, aye, Captain.
Yeah.
You sit down, and lo and behold, they try and do that with the list. You're like, I spotted that. So it was interesting to see that side of it.
No, yeah. I mean, that sounds totally correct. Also, a reasonable segue into our next part. So we've heard a lot about you already, Luke. A good show for you, where we get to sing a lot of your praises. I promise it won't happen again. But how was it for you, right? Because like obviously you and Fabian, Worlds players, you guys have played together since you could walk or whatever. So what how do you sort of approach building a team for competitive play, and also you're sort of onboarding players who maybe have a little less experience than you do? How was all that basically?
So right, so first up, I'm in a hotel, so if my sound isn't great, please let us know, and we'll try and sort it out. But yeah, on the team setup, it was interesting because normally with a competitive team event, I would pick and choose my players, and maybe upset some people. Just pick and choose the best at the time. So I'm known for not sticking with the same people all the time. But yeah, you need to build the team. It's not just players. So as we've just proven that anybody can go to a team tournament with enough prep and win. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be all four of you have to be super competitive.
Mm-hmm.
But lists, the list is the major part. So I think I had the 4 lists locked down pretty early. Me and Phil were obviously running the Northern Studio, wanted to get Seraphon up and running. So that was definitely one of the lists before, and I was going to use the Gits.
Uh-huh.
So we had what we thought were probably the 4 best armies. Well, they were the 4 best armies in that current meta, but we couldn't get the Gits done the Seraphon done in time.
Sure.
So we had to do like a last minute switch. So as much as Phil says I helped to prepare, he still had to adapt. Probably 2 weeks before the event, learning how to use a Gits army.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Nathan, who's been on the show. He sent us his army.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Phil used. So and then I had to change my list, but I just so always experience on an army will serve you better than just switching. So say I don't know. Say the 3 best armies are already taken, which we were in this situation.
Yeah.
But as long as they're not super complicated armies to learn, then you could switch, and as long as you get a few games in, you should do pretty well with those armies. But once that pool of armies has gone, that's quite easy to use and it's very powerful.
Yeah.
I would always recommend falling back onto the army that you know very well. So say if JP was on the team and he was in this situation, I would say to JP, use the Feck list that we prepared. That is still actually quite good. Darren, shout out to Darren, he took Feck in the Gash list, and it was insanely powerful. But yeah, so I just fell back onto Lumineth. So I know the army very well. I made I made a small change and put Atharian in, which we knew had done well at Worlds. The guys that come on, Denmark, the Danish Kings, Rune used an Atharian Techless combo. And yeah, we knew that would work. So I just thought I'd try it at this team event. And he ended up doing... He was the superstar of the list for sure in that combo. But yeah, it was interesting. I would ring Jack. I know Jack is been playing Horus Heresy, so I'd try and ring him every week just to say, look, this is what I think. And to be fair to Jack, I give him a list. He just owned it. And he used the list that I give him, and we only really talked on the phone. Jack maybe had 1 game.
Yeah, I had a couple of test games with Dad in between kind of rounds of chemo and with some of the local guys. And the Luke special of, oh yeah, Stalkers are amazing, Stalkers is all that you want, so I build everything as Stalkers, and he's like, nah mate, Immortis Guard are what you want. So like a night before the tournament, before I'm to drive up to Nottingham, I'm cutting arms off Stalkers and sticking shields and halberds and trying to paint these up, and So yeah, we had to do some last minute adjustments, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When you hear anything from Luke, it's either completely bin or completely amazing. There's
Yeah.
no in between.
There's no like, it's all right. It's this. This is
Yeah,
it.
and shout out to James Dean who has joined us in the chat.
I do believe that. So when I go on the players, is that you can't just pick up AOS and go to a team tournament and then expect to do well with, say, 2 competitive players. Jack is still a very good Age of Sigmar player. He just doesn't do a lot of competitive events. So it's more that the transition of Phil and Jack that normally do a lot of doubles or their own singles events, which is normally at Warhammer World, so they are quite narrative as well. So and they like to run their own lists, which are basically what Meta Breaker stands for. They run their own. They don't want to copy everybody else. So Phil and Jack did just accept that I would write all 4 lists, and they just owned it. And they are still very good players. So as you would expect with a very good army, they perform very well.
Yeah.
To adapt like they did was very impressive. But yeah, I mean, even Fabian, I just submitted his list without even having. He didn't even have a say. I just.
Well, he's not even on the video tonight. We can make him do whatever we want. No, yeah, I think obviously that is sort of going to go without saying that, like, you know, when obviously the fundamentals of Warhammer and AOS are going to be learned by playing games on the table with, you know, any army, and I think, you know, you can be learning a lot of those important skills even if you're playing like a terrible list, and you might be like, okay, so I am only going 3-2, 4-1 with, you know, this list because I really can't beat some of the top stuff, you know, then you can still be learning a lot about the game, you know, and you sort of have to, a lot of times, you know, think of really creative solutions to problems when you're playing a list that doesn't have a lot of outs, and, you know, it's definitely, you're going to learn more than playing, you know, I've definitely had tournaments where I've played whatever the best army at the moment is, and you just don't, you know, most of your games are just, you just turn up and you've, you know, your opponent even sometimes just gives up because they've seen your army, and you don't learn a single thing. So you definitely build those skills playing armies over the time, and then, as you guys mentioned, it's like, then you start building up that prep and jumping onto really, you know, tip-top lists, and that allows you sort of to push to the higher levels, basically, higher levels of gameplay.
Yeah. And I think with the list building itself, you know, something I found interesting was the fact that you don't like have to build this incredibly well-rounded list.
Yeah.
Like, you know, with the list I was running, if I was going to a singles, you know, I wouldn't have just picked Null Myriad. I probably would have picked something else, because, you know, in 30% of your matchups, this massive sub-faction ability won't be doing anything for you, you know? If you're going up against Khorne or Fire Slayers or kind of armies that aren't relying on wisdom, then, like, what's the point? But in a team's event, you know, when Luke's talking to me and he's like, yeah, but you'll go into those magic armies.
Yeah.
You know, because you get some say in the pairing, and, you know, it's not all the time.
No,
like, I could go into a Khorne list whilst I was there, because you don't always get to pick, but you can kind of take that niche pick that only helps you in niche circumstances and almost flip it on its head, in which it helps you in almost every circumstance, because you're choosing who you go into.
It also
I
helps
found
you,
that interesting.
Yeah, it also helps you bully the pairings, right? So if you have no Myriad, right, maybe you don't get to play against Tzeentch, but, like, you can then offer Tzeentch and something they, you know, if you offer no Myriad and KO versus Tzeentch, they don't want to play versus either, and then maybe they're like, okay, well, I really can't kill the Null Myriad army, so I have to play into KO. And in that sense, even if your Null Myriad's not helping you in the Khorne matchup, it's already helped you against the Tzeentch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
it was. It was like I was saying, I had that command trait, the -1 hit and wound on shooting, and I pretty much didn't use it in the entire tournament because I never went up into shooting armies. And it's like you were saying, Luke, weren't you? You were bullying people with that command trait, so KO wouldn't go into me, and you got to pick who goes into the KO and stuff like that.
Yeah. So in four man, it's very difficult to play the pairings game in the actual pairing process. In 4-man, you have to have the lists to then the pairing process. So Jack's army was very unique, as in it. Nobody with shooting wanted to play him.
Yeah.
Nobody with magic wanted to play him. But the problem with Four-man is they can't protect both.
Yeah.
So we had a situation where I think we played quite a difficult team. They had very good lists, and it forced. So I would bust Jack every round. So Jack was always going to get a hard game if they paired well, because I'd use his list to bully the shooting and the magic, which then allowed Fabian and Phil with the gits to get into super green. So they would win. That was another way to win teams, is getting early wins, big early wins, and those players are walking around the table. No, it just puts pressure on the other team, knowing that, okay, it looks like it's over already because there's a few games over already, but doesn't necessarily mean they're going to lose a round because they've still got 2 games going.
Yeah.
Which should be good matchups for them, because in Four-man, if you're equal still, you should both get greens, you should both get reds, and then you should both have a yellow, which will decide the round essentially. But Jack's list is very, very unique in the way that I could use him to bully. So Jack he had 4 very hard games. I bossed him into Darren. I just needed him to get some points, and that's what Jack did. He got the points that I needed, which essentially meant we won that round. And then the one time that it worked so well, where we ended up getting 3 greens, and then I think it was me that was in a yellow. Jack played the Seraphon list that we wanted to take. It's just an extremely powerful Seraphon list that does a lot of mortal wounds. The Trug Bomb with Croak, which probably most people know about. And then Jack showed that that's what the list was built to beat, and he did beat it. I do think Seraphon, because of the summoning, and they have other ways of doing mortal wounds without magic, it was probably not as good as what I thought it was. But Jack, it was still obviously very good for the OBR, and Jack did take that guy out. And that definitely swung around for us in that round.
Yeah, with the summoning, you do have issues there, but I think as well, like kind of what you were saying, you only have to get some points in your game. That almost on a flipping its head, you're more stressed because you don't want to mess up for your team, but at the same time, like that game into Darren with the Feck, like I knew pretty early on I'd lost that game. He got too many points on me, and I wasn't going to do it. But you have to kind of continue focusing on getting the points you can, getting the battle tactics you can, just to make it not a 20-0. So there's like situations where I had my Death Riders, and I was like, oh, I could save the Death Riders, keep putting up screens, try and survive. But and that's probably what I would have done in a singles. But in this doubles list, I was like, well, I'm probably still not going to win. If I throw my Death Riders in now, I can get the battle tactic. I can get another 2 battle tactics, getting all 5 battle tactics.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose the round, but at least I will have got my battle tactics. So I threw them in. You get your 5 battle tactics, and then you still manage to get some points. And in a singles, you wouldn't think like that. You wouldn't think, oh, I'm just going to get the points, and you still try and claw a win no matter what.
Yeah.
But in the teams, you don't do that as much, which I thought was cool.
Absolutely. And those points, again, like in your case, you guys were playing for the win, and it's very important to win the round. But even if you're not, getting those 4 points, if you're in a big team event, where there's 20 odd teams, getting 4 points can be the difference, between one or at least one place. I think in Worlds there were a couple, there were places where getting 5 points would get you up 2 positions in the overall ladder. So you're always playing for that thing. And I know we've said it before about team stuff, but if you can put someone into a red matchup and they come back and say, oh, it was I lost 16-4, often that's as good as someone coming away from their green matchup being like, yeah, I got the 19-1. You're like, both of those are equal results. You know what I mean? Because in terms of the sort of expected points of the overall round, you've absolutely nailed it. So, yeah.
I think that's another interesting change in the competitive play, even for anyone listening to this who's not played a competitive team. Just the very fact, you guys, and straight away within 10 seconds of the parents, Luke and Fabian were like, right, this is 3 greens to us, we've got the round. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like, well, the round's done kind of thing, and kind of you'd come away and you'd be like, all three of us, well, maybe Fabian not so because he knew it better than me and Jack, but like, are we happy with these pairings or not? And he would immediately tell us, right, these are the greens, this is the one you're looking out for. So having that back again to our transition, Jack, in terms of the event, having that level of calmness and that almost overriding sense of confidence of like, we already know what's going to happen this round. Again, that confidence breeds confidence, doesn't it? And you're less worried about letting the team. You're like, right, okay, so I now know this matchup. You still want to do the job for the team, but you're like, right, now this matchup's one that the team wanted.
Yeah.
So I know what's expected from me. Like you've said, it's a red, so I know I'm trying to just stop them getting a 20-0, or I know that my job now is to get a 20-0 because this is the pairing. So, and I think going into the last round, we were obviously all quite aware we had a chance to kind of play for top spot, etc. But again, as soon as the pairings were done, Luke took me and Jack to one side, went, right, that's 4 greens for us. You know what I mean? And you're like, right, so you'll lose these pairings. It's just straight away a level of pressure was off, even though we knew we had to play for top spot, we had to win the games. It gave you that level of surety to go, right, the guys who know what they're talking about are saying these are the matchups we wanted. You know what I mean? And even though you knew you had to focus on your game and doing your job, that level of calm that comes from that knowledge of both sides of the table. And I think the pairings process, like you say, Luke, it's harder to bully in the pairings process, but even sitting down, Luke knowing psychology between how to put the pressure on the opposing captain, certainly a couple of teams that their captains, even I think one of the top teams we played, they put their less experienced player onto the pairings. Or there's one round, wasn't there, Luke, where you said you were trying to rush the pairings through because the chap who'd volunteered to do it, there was a more experienced chap who was, wasn't around, kind of thing. So, but they were just keen to get the pairings done. So they were like, oh, let's get on. They were pushing us through the pairings, but Luke knew that was the right thing to do. And just that level of knowledge of the other teams and stuff is I say we'll mock him somewhere in this video, I'm sure. But in terms of like, the captain's job, that captain's job is so crucial to then protect the players from the stress.
It is something like I didn't really think would play such an impact is the pairings process. But I think because people breed niche lists for teams events, that pairing process just becomes so important.
Absolutely. I think also, as Luke said, in a 4-man tournament, you have a limited amount of control of when you get to pairing. So a lot of it is done before you go to the event, right? You need to make sure you have enough, because there'll be people who at those teams events who would just come against your 4 list and be like, there's no way to wrangle this where we don't give away 3 greens to the opponent, So James Dean has a question about what would you say makes a green matchup or a red matchup? So aside from the obvious, which is just that like easy to win, easy to lose, Luke, what would you say is the difference between like what takes something from like a yellow matchup like winnable to a green matchup, or from a yellow matchup which is 50-50 to a red matchup? What would you say like are the big differences there?
So that is all knowledge. So every team can say, I got 2 greens, I got a yellow and a red, and then the other team can say, I got 4 greens, like what we did. But all of that is in before knowing what matchups do well into what. So that is just studying the meta at the time, knowing that let's say KO into Slanesh or KO into Lumineth. It's very well known that KO most of the time will almost table the Lumineth and the Slanesh army because they have no recovery mechanic. They just lose too many bodies and they can't sustain the damage that's coming at them. So that is literally to know if you're in a green matchup is to know if you've played. It's simple, but knowing that you've played that matchup or you've seen that matchup being played several times, and it's also not just. It's hard. It's very hard because there's very few like high end competitive players that are playing each other and getting these results. So obviously, I will just play a lot with what I would consider the players that are winning the tournaments all the time. So I guess I can say that some of the best players for me to get these results from. So that's how I will know what a red and a green matchup is from past experience of knowing what this matchup does into what. I also watched the World Championships. World Championships was a large part of getting these lists ready for Warhammer World. if I didn't have World Championships to study from, it would have been a lot harder, I think,
Sure.
to know what was a good matchup, because we had all these new armies that weren't at the World Championships. We had OBR, we had Solblai, and then we had Seraphon, and they weren't at the World Championships. So it was hard to know whether they were the way to what was a good into what. It's just no. I played the non-Myriad a few times in Seraphon. I thought it was pretty good for the Seraphon, for the non-Myriad OBR. But I did, yeah, it was interesting to see that it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be when it actually happened.
Sure.
But yeah, essentially, so against like what Phil said last round, I said we had 4 greens. So before every round, I would put the pressure massively on Jack and Phil, saying, "We need to win. We need to win every round if you want to win the tournament." So the last round was literally, if we lose this round, that team will win the tournament, even though we probably had the highest score.
Yeah.
If they just beat us, the way that the Warhammer World did the scoring, they would have won their tournament.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I would go talk to them after the pairing process and just say how I expect this round to go.
Yeah.
And it did every time. So.
I think that can be especially good if you're someone in a red matchup. It can be somewhat comforting to be like, we got, at Worlds, if you're like, you're in a red, but we got 2 yellows and 5 greens or whatever, and in your case, if you're like, you're in a red, but we got 3 greens, that definitely makes you, that makes you feel better, especially when you're like, what am I playing against? And you're like, the list that counters me. And they're like, don't worry, like, it's under control. Just get me, bring me those 3 points.
Like, yeah, just do what you can.
Exactly, yeah. So, all right, so then, now I think this is a reasonably interesting part of it for me. And we can start with you again, Phil. I guess we've been starting with you. But if I want you to imagine, you're someone watching this video and you're like, look, I know I felt like this before I'd ever been to a Warhammer tournament. You're like, I'm worried about getting into competitive play because I don't want to experience like, awful people being awful to me at the table, or like all the stress, like, but so I mean you're welcome to say maybe that's all true, but it doesn't sound like it is. But like, so what would you say if you were talking to someone who was like, oh, I want to get into tournaments, I want to get into being a bit more competitive, but I also want to have fun, would you say that's is that possible? Is it easy? Like, what was your experience like at the tournament in terms of like having fun as well as obviously competing?
No, I think the best thing you say to anybody is get in there and try it. The scariest thing anybody faces is something they've never done before. And I think once you go in and try it for the first time, it's never quite as bad. Now, I think there are certain events you could pick and choose which give you an easier way into that. So Jack alluded to, go into Slaughter is a very, very competitive environment. And everybody is going to win. That's what that event is. I think, as Luke touched on earlier, me and Jack have done lots of events at Warhammer World, which tends to be a bit of an easy way in. That's not to say there's not other regional events that are a bit of an easy way in as well, but you know what you're getting at Warhammer. You might get 2 or 3 people who are going from the more competitive scene who are going to clock the win. But a lot of people, you see a lot of familiar faces at Warhammer World, and I think at most events in general, unless I'm not saying the gameplay would be bad, but unless you're on those top 5 or 6 tables at the majority of events, you aren't on with any particular hyper-competitive players. Most people are there looking to have, a few wins with their army, play some things they don't face in their gaming group, and have some good games and meet some people from different parts of the world.
Sure,
So I think most people are there for that. And even the guys who are there to win, to be fair, when you there's probably a how do I say this? A group just below the top players who are probably the worst place, because the top players know they're the top players. And they have absolutely no need to be mean because they know they're going to beat you, even when they're nice. Do you know what I mean? It's Luke's like a smiling assassin. Like Fabian's the friendliest man in the room, and he's tabling everyone on turn 2. Do you know what I mean? Like that because they've got the confidence of their list. I think you get a level below that where the players aren't quite so good, and maybe they are taking what we try and push people towards, which is don't take meta lists. But they are taking meta lists because they want to push themselves that next level. And they think a certain list will help them do that. And even then, I don't think they will. But sometimes we've all faced it. Everybody who's played the game has faced it. Occasionally, you get a person who just doesn't like losing, and they become a bit edgy. Do you know what I mean? It's not a bad game, but it's not an enjoyable game.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? You're
sure.
just kind of getting through it and going, look, let's just have the, you know. But
Talking them
wouldn't
off the
say I've
ledge for a little while.
yeah, you know, and I wouldn't say I've ever had a really bad. In fact, one of the best tournaments I ever went to was the first tournament I ever went to, and I lost all 5 games. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I had a blast. I just enjoyed the fact I was there and I was doing it, and
Sure.
I've never been to one before, and that experience of doing it, and you know, I genuinely every event I've ever been to,
Yeah.
singles, doubles, teams, whatever, there is, you know, 90+% of people smiling through their games. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
People are there to have good games, and you know, I had 5 good games at this event. You know, and the 2 games on Sunday were against, you know, obviously the last game was obviously the in theory the top two teams
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
event
yeah.
played to win. The round prior to that on Sunday morning, you know, we knew there was a couple of other teams that had top Team England players in, world players in, and we were facing one of those teams. We knew it was going to be a tough
Yeah.
round, but all those guys were fantastic, do you know? So it's just in that, you know, you've just got the confidence, I think, of knowing your own list. That's important.
Yeah.
Know your own list completely inside out, so you're not questioning yourself, and know enough about the other list, not in detail. You know,
Sure.
Luke,
Yeah.
Luke, Fabian, yourself. You know, it's like scientific understanding of the other list, but having a general understanding of the list, so you know some of the things that are there, so you can, and having the confidence to ask a question as well. I've never come across anyone at an event who's made a genuine mistake, who's complained that you picking up, just go, look, can we just have a look with the app, and particularly with the
Yeah.
app now on the phone.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with flicking on your phone, getting the app, like, excuse me, I've just had a look at it. It's not that. Do you know what I mean? And people are very accepting of that now.
Yeah.
It's all, it's an easy way to have that conversation rather than the old days with books and stuff.
Yeah,
Having a confrontation because you have to get a book out and it's clear you're questioning what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Or you haven't got their book with you, so you've got no way of questioning. So
That's a good.
it's just having that confidence in what your own army does and knowing enough about other armies that you have enough confidence in the rules. And that's where, again, playing games, like you said, it's not necessarily about, we did do test games for this event, but it's just playing enough to know enough of the rules to have the confidence to play the round. Do you know what I mean? But I've never. No, I can't think of a bad game I've had at an event. Genuinely,
Yeah, no.
I
As
think
you
I would
say.
never want to play that person again. I've never had that experience, fortunately. And everyone I've ever come across an event is as I say, smiling and looking to have some conversation, and I think some of it as well is it is a little bit, and it's strange in our hobby because the hobby appeals to a certain type of person that maybe some of us are a bit socially inept and stuff like that, but you do have to actually be decent at reading other people. So some people want to chat to you throughout the game.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm quite a talking
Yeah,
person, but
yeah.
I'm going to show up at some point and carry on. But so you want to talk to people through the game, where some people don't like that. They want to concentrate. They're like, they don't want to say, don't talk to me. But you can see in their
Sure.
body language, they
Yeah.
don't want to talk to you. And then it can come across like you're trying to put them off. So it's trying to be respectful of how the other person likes to play. It's clearly don't want to talk while they're playing their turn.
Yeah.
Kind of wind it back a bit, even if you're more of an out there person. But I would just say, just dive in and give it a go. Genuinely dive in and give it a go, because that's how to take any of the fear factor away. Because
Agreed.
you know, any of us on here, it's not scary once you've done it, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
And team events, great way to get into it, because you get some other people there with you. And I just absolutely agree. I think even, Warhammer tournaments, when you're starting out, is almost the wrong word. They are Warhammer events, right?
Yeah.
Like you, as you say, people are going so that they can play different people, get games with their list, all that stuff. Like if you're new to tournaments, I definitely think you just rock up. Again, I played some games where I'm like, "Whew, that was a bit of a chore," right? Like because maybe the person really wanted to win, or they were a bit tired, or whatever. But I've never had a game where I was like,
Oh my god, like this has put me off tournaments. You know what I mean? So I think you sort of hit the nail on the head there.
I
Jack,
think
yeah.
that is it, because like Warhammer, and I think it's one of the things that is incredible about Warhammer is that you get to interact with the person you're playing. It's not like a video game where it's over a screen and over the internet, and you don't see who you're playing with. So you are playing with people, you're talking to people, and as ever with people, there will be people you get on with and people you don't.
Yep.
And you will have that in tournaments, but like
Luke, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Like Luke, nobody gets on with Luke, but we have to deal with him anyway. But I think that is always something that will happen in any game, but it can happen at your club. You'll play against someone and you thought, I didn't quite enjoy their play style, and that's all right. You know, you don't have to get on with everyone, but I think there is this misconception that every competitive player is there to win. They're not, you know, they're
Yeah.
not there to banter. They're not there to have a joke. They're there to win. They're going to play their game. They're going to get in your head. They're going to try and make you go wrong. And I think that is a really big misconception. Like the game I was playing against the Feck, and you know, he forgot his tunnel master, and I went, you know, just do it. And then
Yeah,
later on in the game, I forgot my tunnel master, and he was like, yeah, just do it. Like, go for it, man.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And you can have a competitive game while still being jovial and friendly with each other, and understanding that we are still people, especially on a Sunday morning when everyone's been out getting smashed.
No, yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that is something that worries people about going to tournaments, is that these competitive people are here to win and they're going to be malicious and nasty, but they're not. I don't, you know, I think they're all nice people and stuff like that, and we're all here to play some Warhammer, have some fun with our plastic toys that we spent way too much money on. Like, you know, that's it. And I think if you're wanting to get into tournaments, a good place to start, and it's where I started, are doubles events.
Sure.
Because doubles events, you know, you're not there on your own, you're with your friend, and often people at doubles events aren't there to thrash their opponent with the most horrific army ever. It's usually two mates looking to have a weekend away for a bit of fun. You know, a lot of the time people have spent more time on the painting and the modeling and like getting their armies together to look cool. So I think that is a really good place to start if you're wanting to do tournaments. Is doubles.
I think that's a really good
Wait,
point.
we have to rewind a bit. So Darren forgot his tunnel master.
Yeah, and then I forgot mine.
Darren, we got our codes.
All right. Hopefully he never sees this. Hopefully this doesn't come to light. Hopefully this doesn't start a
He's off
thing.
the team now. He's off the team. Forget it.
So
Nobody remembers Tunnel Master. Nobody remembers.
I don't remember half the rules in the game. Also, shout out to Thomas Backhouse and Philip McGuinness, both representatives up in the Scottish scene that I've met and loved. So yeah, shout out to those guys in the chat. Okay, yeah. So I think we've touched definitely a little bit on how to get in the scene there. I sort of want to hear a little bit now from Luke. If you were going to give someone advice, so like let's say you've got your friends, you've been to a couple tournaments, and now you want to be like, all right, I want to make a team and start, you know, move from like playing for fun, you know, which is fine, to like, okay, I want to win an event, I want to take this team to the next level. What would be some advice for them? I think obviously we've already touched on, you know, practice a lot, which is definitely going to be a part of it, but what would you say, you know, again, what advice would you give to people who are like, I want to take my 3 friends, go to Warhammer Worlds, I want to beat Luke's team and, you know, win the next one?
Oh man. Yeah, that's a hard question.
It's all just natural gift, isn't it?
It's just pure talent.
It's not that he doesn't want to help the competition, does he? Give everyone the advice.
He's got his 10-step plan to success, but he ain't sharing that with anyone.
I think I said a lot of it already, right? You've got to study the meta.
Mhm.
You've got to practice what you think are your green matchups. But you should always seek playing people that are better than you to learn, and you have to look at losing as learning. Ideally, you don't want to be losing while you're not while you're at a tournament.
Winning while you're Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
But if Jack and Phil took this on board, Jack a few years ago, is a lot of people can get really sunk into blaming dice about everything, and essentially dice will lose you a game sometimes, but if you focus on when you roll badly, that's all you ever remember, and you will never remember when you roll well.
Yeah.
So if you blame dice, there is always a way to mitigate the dice being bad for you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll roll key rolls and they don't go your way, so it's the dice's fault. But then you'll never remember when you roll, I don't know,
Yeah, when you get the
Yeah.
boxcar charge, yeah.
Exploding sixes with Catacross or something. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you never remember that, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just you as soon as you can get that out of your head, and then also learn from losing. If you lose, always think about why you lost,
Yeah. I think that's a
and
really
then
good point.
put that into practice. So you'd want to have a team of players that accept that that is the first rule, really. If you had a player on the team that would blame dice, they will not. You can't rely on them. I couldn't rely on that player to perform in the way that I want to.
Yeah, and I mean that's just true in life as well as Warhammer. That you got to have a sort of self-critical eye and look at what you could be doing better in order to progress as a player. Luckily, it's fairly straightforward in Warhammer.
I mean that's it.
Stuff.
Like it's law of averages, isn't it? You know, like dice will average out over a game. You're probably going to get as many bad rolls as you will good rolls.
Yep.
So like it. You know, you just remember the bad rolls. You remember the time when you needed that double turn to win, but you don't remember the time where you got that double turn and won. You know, in a game.
I never have. I've never won priority yet. But no, absolutely. And also, like, I think what's always important to remember is there are players out there like Luke, you know, and Dan Bradshaw, Darren Watson, Fabian, all these players who have, you know, very, 95% plus win rates, and they're not winning 95% of the priority rolls. You know, over that many games, they're winning half of the priority rolls, same as everyone else. They're having the games where they've won the game, even though they've lost all 4 priority rolls. All that stuff has happened to them. And again, it's not to say that there aren't going to be games where you're a top player playing against another top, or, you're just playing against a player who's equally skilled, has an equally good list. A priority roll is not going to go your way and you're going to lose because of that. That's going to happen. But that doesn't also mean to say that if you played the game in a different way, you could have maybe mitigated that double turn or something like that. But yeah, agreed. I think that's a good point Luke makes, which is if you're building a team, you want people who are focused on learning and improving, because really that's, just like in everything else, that's gonna be what carries you.
You also, as a captain, you have to just accept that you've got to carry everybody, especially Fabian.
Whoa! Fabian told us to mention how much he had to carry you. What are you about?
You can tell we've passed the useful segment of the video.
With me, he loses all of his games, and when he's on a team event with me, he wins all of his games.
So I think as a reasonable recap here, I think the big takeaways are going to be that in terms of the competitive side, you really want to make sure that you are getting the prep for the meta list, because if you're not, other people are. They're going to know the pairings better than you are. They're going to know the matchups better than you are, and that's just going to take them to those wins. In terms of the competitive side, it sounds like everybody had a really good time, and these people, you guys were at the top tables. You're playing some of the best players, from around the country, and I think I can say that my experience is the same, is that these players still want to have a good fun. You're stuck at the table for 2.5 hours together. Everybody wants it to be as fun as possible,
Just nail down on that is that you definitely want to build a team with players. Are you friends? Like Jack is. We have the same name, so everybody probably thinks he's my little brother. He is. He's not my brother blood, but he is like my little brother. So, and we've known each other quite a long time. I've seen
you wind me up like a big brother as well.
I've seen Jack evolve as he's grown up. Phil is like my best. I call him my dad, but he is one of my, if not one of my best friends. And then Phil is on the show now. We've known each other a while, and we believe it or not, I do play for fun. So when we play, it was normal. It was just for fun. We never would play super competitively together.
Absolutely.
You still need to build a team with your friends. Essentially, I wouldn't recommend just building a team of 4 people that don't know each other and don't bond well. I think Denmark, when Denmark come on, and if you listen to their show, before this, they do nail down on how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Stole my point there, Luke, but I agree 100%. Denmark was saying the same thing. They were just, and like again, even outside of the game, you got to go somewhere and spend a weekend with these people. Like, one, is going to make you play better, but two, you're just going to have a better time if you have to come out of being bussed into KO, right, and you've lost 19-1. You want to make sure that the person you're telling is like, oh, well played, mate. You got that. You didn't get 20-0, and then you're going to be like, oh, sick. And then when they win, you're going to be happy, So definitely, that's just a tie-in to the title of the video. But yeah, the secret to winning, both in terms of your fun and the game, is just to make sure that you're there with 3 of your mates or 7 of your mates if it's Worlds or whatever. Like, it that's what it's about at the end of the day, is just being able to look back and be like, yes, I was there. Luke got to play with 2 of his friends and Fabian and have just a great time. So, yeah, I think that's most of the stuff that we have prepared. I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to add before we wrap this up.
No.
So,
Oh, I didn't want to give the shout out.
yes, that would, yeah.
I've been told by my dad. So on the latest Warhammer Weekly, on Vince's Warhammer Weekly, a guy named Tyler gave a big shout out to my dad. Because if anybody doesn't know, most people probably will know, he did do a show about it. He is going through cancer treatment at the minute. So the shout out was really appreciated, Tyler, and he wanted me to just say a big thank you if you're watching this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to keep. That's exactly what we're talking about. Just the community. The community,
Yeah.
I think, it really is always what sucks everybody back into Warhammer. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Best thing about it.
All right. Well, Phil, thanks for joining us for your first ever show. I'm sure we will have you back
No worries.
soon. I liked you, so. Yeah, and Jack, thanks for coming on as well.
Yeah.
Luke, me and you don't get any thanks because we're just always here, just talking garbage for an hour. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff. We got a bunch of stuff planned, hobby side, army side. Shout out to Big Tom, who has joined exactly 2 seconds before the end of the show, and also shout out to our patrons who make all this stuff possible. But yeah, thanks and good night.
See ya.
See you later, guys.
This video is made possible by our patrons. If you want to know more about how to support us, click on the link to the right.